Order the work session in City of Apache Junction. Roll call.
Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rizzi.
Present.
Councilmember Biggs.
Here.
Councilmember Evans.
Here.
Councilmember Gremmel.
Here.
Councilmember Nesser.
Present.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Here.
You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you. Agenda items number 22-092, presentation discussed with staff and employment law attorney Justin Pierce of Pierce Coleman PLLC on consideration involving the potential of transition of the executive level department director positions from an at-will to a, I wasn't on? Oh. Okay. Versus employment with due right process.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and introduce.
Let's have Matt kick it off.
I'll introduce Justin Pierce here in a moment. Recent questions from city council members and discussion revolving around this idea of what it looks like to transition from department directors who serve as career status versus at will. This is kind of our first night of that continuing process of learning what that is and what it looks like, and what that means for our city as you all discuss this. So tonight's a night to hear from Justin, who is in this field quite often and deals with this a lot, and then we can answer any questions as we continue to work with you as the city council on this item. Justin, you want to come up? I'll get your presentation up here. All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's good to be with you tonight. As Matt said, I work in the area of employment law. My law firm is the employment law provider for the members of the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. I've been doing this for about 20 years. My firm also represents 11 Arizona municipalities as their contracted city or town attorneys. Been through this a time or two. And I asked Matt how long I have here, because when it comes to employment law, I can talk for hours. So he said just take a few minutes, though. So I'll take you through some things here, and as a starting point, just kind of what we'll talk about. And we're going to talk about at-will, I may use these terms, at-will, classified, which I think Matt used the term career, for example, career level, classified, contract employees. Those all have meanings in employment law. So we're going to talk about those differences, talk about the pros and cons of each, talk about what it means to have a property interest in employment, because that's going to be at play when it comes to classified employees, including taking a classified status and making a change with them, contractual employees as well. And then at the very end, best approach practically and legally. So let's define what we're talking about. I often just last week, in fact, I was speaking with a group of executive level folks, and one person asked me, "Well, Arizona's a right to work state, right? We can terminate whenever we want." And I said, those are two different things. So when we talk about right to work, if you hear somebody say, "Well, we're a right to work state," put that out of your mind. That's really dealing with union issues. That simply means that no employer in Arizona can compel somebody to join a union in order to receive employment. So put that out of your mind. Let's talk at-will employment. At-will employment simply means, and it is the presumption in Arizona, that employees are at will, and it simply means that you can separate employment with somebody who is at will for any reason that's not an illegal one. And so I often use an example of, somebody walks in with I was going to say a red shirt, but we got a couple of those here. So let's say I would say pink, but let's just say a shirt color that you don't like, and you are the boss, and you say, "You know what, that just doesn't look good to me today. You're fired." That's the stupidest reason you've ever heard to fire somebody, but it's totally legal. You don't have to have a reason. That is the definition of at-will employment, and the employee, by the same token, is able to do the same thing. They can separate for any reason whatsoever. Contractual employment. Sometimes in an at-will setting, people, there are contracts of employment that don't change the at-will nature of the employment. You can still terminate the person at will. They serve, for example, at the pleasure of the council, but there's a contract that says if you do that, here's what you have to do as a result of it. So it's just a contractual relationship. It doesn't necessarily change the at-will relationship unless the contract specifically says it does. For example, a contract of employment can say, we agree we won't terminate you unless we have good cause to do so. And good cause means X, Y, and Z. And you can define that. You can do that with a contract. Classified employment is something that we generally hear of in government service. And that is when you give a property interest in someone's employment to them. And what you've said is via a policy or via a practice of an organization, we won't terminate you unless we do have cause. And when you do that in the government environment, it creates a property interest. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. But so here are some pros and cons of all of those approaches. Number one, at will, you can separate for any legal reason, and it's in theory, it's easy. The con is that doctrine has been largely obliterated. In 20 years, again, of doing this, I can tell you that when I get phone calls from clients, employers who have at-will employees and say, hey, I have this employee, I want to terminate them, they're at will, so I don't need a reason, I'm just going to call them in, I'm going to say, I am exercising my right as an employer to terminate you at will, and that's all I'm going to say. And I generally say that's not a good idea. And when the question of why? Well, what happens when that person says, well, I think you actually terminated me because of, and over time we've developed this huge number of protected statuses and categories in the law, whether it's race, religion, national origin, disability, age, whistleblowing status. There's just so many things, and all the person has to do is say, well, I think it's because of this, and then the burden shifts in the law. The burden shifts over to the employer, says, well, they say it's because of race or gender or whatever. What say you? And if you say, well, it's because I just didn't like them anymore, it's not going to fly. And so the doctrine has been largely obliterated. I always tell my clients, my employers, that you need to have a reason of some sort. It doesn't have to be perfect, wonderful, but there's got to be a reason when you're asked why you terminated somebody. Contractual, again, specifically, you can define terms for separation, and that's a positive. The negative, in my view, is it opens up the door for breach of contract causes of action through employment, and I think that raises its own set of issues. Classified, one of the pros is the due process that comes with it often leads to less claims down the road. There's a process that a classified employee who's terminated has an appeal right, for example, through an appeals board, an administrative process. And while on the one hand, it's a bit of a pain because it's like you wouldn't have to do that if the person was at will, I have found over years of doing this, most of the time that process ends the debate. So once you win it at that process, if a hearing officer, a personnel board, or whatever determines, yeah, you had good reason to terminate this person, oftentimes they've had their case heard. They don't run off to the EEOC. They don't run off to a lawyer at that point because they had their case heard. And so that's one of the positives of due process. The negatives, of course, it adds a pretty significant layer of red tape, makes it harder to separate. So I mentioned property interest. Once you do that, once you've given somebody a classified status, you've told them, we won't terminate your employment unless there's cause. The U.S. Supreme Court has said, you gave that person a property. This is not the law, according to Justin, by the way. I totally disagree with this line of thinking in cases, but it's the state of the law. This person has a property interest in their employment. Now let's go back to Constitution 101. When somebody has property, can the government take it? Not without due process of law, right? So they've got to give them notice and an opportunity to be heard. And the law on that has developed over time to where before you separate them, you have to give them a notice of intent to separate. We intend to terminate you. Here are all the reasons. We're giving you notice. Now you got to give them an opportunity to be heard. They've got to be able to come in and tell you all the reasons why, no, you're missing it. Now you terminate them, and they have all this post-termination process in order to have a neutral hearing before somebody who can hear their case and make that determination. So there's a lot of There's a lot that goes to that. Contractual employment is typically reserved for the highest level positions in an organization. I don't usually see contracts of employment, especially in the municipal setting, beyond city attorney, city manager, maybe an assistant city manager, clerk, depending on how the reporting structure works. Director levels and below, it's my experience is very rare, although it's not impossible and it has happened. And you can, and generally should, have at-will employees without a contract. Most of the line, I mean, you go to work at Walmart today, you're going to get a job, and you're going to be an at-will employee, and you're not going to have a contract of employment. And that's pretty typical for most line employees. So, what should you do? That's my little attempt at humor. That's how I respond to people sometimes when they ask me a question I don't want to answer. It's a really difficult balance, but it's a policy decision for a board like this to look and say, well, there are certainly benefits, there are pros to having an at-will workforce, there are downsides. If I was starting an organization today, if I was starting a company, if we were going to go incorporate a city, I would start with an at-will workforce, because I think in the end it's probably a little bit easier to manage that. But I wouldn't do it by a lot. I would kind of inch this way toward that. If I had a workforce that was already classified and I wanted to move to at-will, it's a difficult proposition. It's something you can do. We've done it. I helped the process through the state when the state did it in 2013. I was heavily involved in that process when the governor at the time, Governor Brewer, made a big change. Was one of her pillars of what she was trying to work on was to change the status of a lot of state employees. There are ways to do it. I've been involved in that process, and it can definitely create some challenges, because you cannot take somebody who has that property interest, take that property interest away from them, again, unless you have good cause, or two, you offer them something in return. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but there are a lot of pros and cons on each side of it. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as it pertains to the issue.
Braden, you want to start it?
I don't have questions, at least for you, at this point in time. I guess I more or less have questions for our staff. First off, how many, I understand there are certain department directors that could go under this category, and then there are ones, I believe, like I think our finance director, if memory serves, that could not necessarily be under that. What are we looking at there, and how many department directors?
Do you want to take that one, Matt?
Well, we have
City Code.
I think the question is which by city code what limits those things, right? And that's what I think the real limiting factor for us right now, because in city code, the department directors we have listed in city code are listed as, I think the term is career status, but it means what's the term used in here, Justin?
Classified?
Classified, yeah. Is that the term, Joel?
It's also career status and classified.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back and forth there. Then I
there's
think
also
there's a
some-
handful or less that just the code's silent on their whole department, and that's probably because we created that department director after the code was written, and we just haven't formalized that yet. So I could try to remember all of the ones that are in there, but it's like police chief, development services, finance is in there, city clerk, city manager. You have them, Joel?
City clerk, finance director, public works, public safety, development service director, library director, park and rec director. Those are all classified employees. And then the ones that aren't mentioned are HR director, IT director, also assistant city managers, also economic development director. And this is the water district, but water district director is also not on there. So you have to create section code sections to address those if you want to.
So 10 to 12 directors, essentially, is what we're kind of talking about there.
More or less, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it's important. So I've actually spoken to 3 department directors now, and 2 of them brought forth the same question, which was that and you kind of touched on it a little bit on the political climate, is would we report to council? And it's my intention, and I believe that's how this would work, that would not be the case, that the department directors would in fact report to you and Matt or Bryant in that case, so that those department directors are not at the mercy of the ever-changing council every 2 to 4 years in terms of an election cycle. So I think making sure that that's known is important there. For me, I think one of the reasons that this was brought forward was also to look at it as an incentive for our department directors, because as I understand it currently, department directors are hired at the salary range to which they fit, and then they receive a 2.5% step increase year over year, as well as every other staff member. So there's really no major incentive outside of, I think, keeping your job and doing your job to excel or bring a new vision, change, constantly be moving forward. So that's one of those opportunities there. And I do think that this could be a great opportunity to really incentivize any of our department directors who might feel that they bring something new to a table or have re-energized that department, whatever that might be, to negotiate then with you guys as senior management to say, you know, hey, I think this is my goal and this is where I want to be, as well as give you guys both the opportunity to have those contractual obligations and say, well, okay, I'm going to pick on the chief of police because he happens to be in the room, but you know, our goal is to hire and retain 95% of our officers, and if you do that, that's a check mark, and we can reward you for that through your contract. So that would go with really any department director, I think, in my view here, as well as then your opportunities to really come back and say, you know, council has this vision, or you guys have this vision for the community, and these department directors need to meet those goals to make that happen. I'll leave it at that for right now and open it up to these guys.
Mr. Mayor, I can, on to that point, Councilmember Biggs, so you can also establish merit increases and other things even within the contours of a classified status. And I have a municipal client of mine who does that. They took their directors, in fact, so this is why you can see there's pros and cons each way. They took their directors who were at will and actually made them a classified status at one point before a changeover in a council some years ago, for concerns of, that was the original impetus for the classified status, was in government employment to eliminate political patronage sort of situations where people feel like their employment is going to be affected based on, you know, who's elected at different levels. So that was the original point. But even within that framework, you can establish merit principles that allows for somebody to get raises and other things like that based on merit as you set it out in policy.
We used to do that when I first got here. And early on, about 2005, we changed in one of the pay periods. It has pros and cons, like you said, and one of the worries was employees were really concerned at some of the, 12 different department directors, and they all grade or view merit differently, and they would compare across the organization. In addition, they were just concerned about their performance. They didn't worry about goal setting. All they worried about is that in that moment, what they were going to get.
Yeah.
And so working with staff over the years, they've kind of been comfortable, which is good and bad. There's pros and cons to the step plan that we've had.
So where this change has occurred, did you see a huge change in salaries? Like, because we're a smaller city, even though we're just on the precipice of getting bigger, but still will be a mid-sized city, and budget is always an issue. I personally would prefer a classified rather than the bonus system, just because I would want more money if I didn't have that classified protection. Especially, it's hard for us getting people here that aren't from here, because not having a property tax, our wages can't compare to the cities around us. So what has been your experience? Do they want more? Do they stay the same? How does that work?
It's a wonderful question, Councilmember Evans. And my experience has been that the classified versus unclassified, this won't help you very much in this decision-making process, hasn't really driven that in the experience that I've seen. What really drives it are location, your ability to drive, retail, sales tax, and other things where some organizations, and Bryant probably knows one that I'm thinking of, that has just per capita a budget that is just out of this world, and they keep and retain almost all their people because they pay more. But that hasn't turned on whether they were at will, whether they were classified or not. So I haven't found, as I'm thinking now kind of around the whole state and the different organizations we've worked with, I can't say that, oh yeah, there's a pretty strong this way or that way, the classified, the unclassified, that there's a difference based on that I can think of.
So the cities that are our size in general, have you worked with this and them, and what did they, and you don't have to tell me names,
Yeah,
but
no. What's your population now?
about
Just under 40,000.
Okay, so you're similar to like El Mirage, and I think El Mirage is like 35,000. I work closely with them. It's interesting because different organizations and even different departments within those organizations. So, for example, the police department, a lot of times that they really like the step. Most of them, as I've seen, they like a step program.
where they're going.
Yeah, they want to know exactly where it's going, whereas the other departments in the organization feel differently about that. But I'm thinking out in El Mirage, for example, all their department directors, I think a lot of them are at will, but this is funny, they created a contract for them several years ago just to give them a severance package if they were terminated at will instead of for cause. So just as kind of a way to protect them from, again, the kind of the political whims of
Yeah.
the,
But
We're in the process of trying to gather that data. We have some from our comparable organizations are Avondale, Buckeye, Casa Grande, Goodyear, Marana, Maricopa City, City of Mesa, Oro Valley, and Queen Creek. And we're still learning a little bit about what they do, because then in some of them, like Queen Creek, they do employment agreements where Mesa doesn't, but they're all they're not classified, if I've got that right, Matt, right?
They're at will.
They're at will.
So Mesa directors would be at will. Queen Creek directors would have contracts.
Yeah. Whereas in Avondale and in Casa Grande, they're like us. They haven't changed yet. And then we went and looked at Goodyear, and they're in the process of hiring a police chief, and this will be their first one. They're going towards a contract. And we also had a police chief at one point that had a contract that was with the city manager.
So my question's to you then, because this sort of falls on you one way or the other, whether someone is, if you want to say censured, or if you have a problem, this isn't working, can you correct it, or however you approach that. If there's a problem with one of the directors, it would then go just to you to say, sorry, see ya, bye.
In a contract world or in a classified? Because
In the at-will world.
in the at-will world,
So how does that, I
It-
guess,
it
how does that
would-
currently work?
It would fall on one person,
well,
or would it be a committee, or is that something that would have to be decided as well, if we decided to change it?
I would envision it staying very similar to what it is now. Not meaning, it would be called something different, but the directors all report to me if there's a problem. Right now, we go through a disciplinary process, and as outlined in our personnel rules. But ultimately, Bryant, as the city manager, just as it says in city code, he signs off on all people we hire and all people we fire. And so nothing's done without him, but really that process of discipline usually starts with me and the director. And of course, Bryant and me work very close on all these personnel type issues.
So even these people that are at will can still go through a disciplinary before they were let go.
Oh, yeah.
So that would remain the same, correct?
And so that gets to that issue where I said even the at-will doctrine, how it's been kind of obliterated. Showing that you've worked with somebody and showing a history,
Your documentation.
a documentation that, hey, we tried to progressive discipline. Let's face it, it's a lot more expensive to try to hire a new employee than to correct
Absolutely.
some behavior if it's correctable. But that's what management does, is they determine is there action we can take to correct this employee and get them to a point where they're producing as they should be, and that's always good documentation. And these guys, they have a free line to the lawyers at my firm as part of the risk pool deal that we have. In fact, tonight I'm here and you're not paying for this, so I'm just this is just part of your.
You shouldn't have told us that. We've got all the time
Yeah.
now.
No, I told you I love that. We're talking. I'm fun at parties. I talk about employment law, so.
So to Gail's question, the current process right now ultimately falls on Bryant?
He has to sign off on anyone that's fired.
Okay.
in the city.
So I keep hearing that there's this concern that they might have elected people that are trying to get rid of somebody. You said that in a nice way. We could have a manager with the same thing that just didn't like somebody. And the way that the current process is could literally be the same thing that you just described, only not the elected people, but with the city manager. So we have that process right now. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? It falls on Bryant?
Yeah, he's the city manager.
We could
That's
have the
city
same scenario.
management
It's
form of government,
not being council that's trying to get rid of somebody. It falls on one person. And potentially that one person could not like the way that somebody has a haircut.
Oh, that's an at-will person.
I just
That's
want to
right.
clarify that, because the way that I'm hearing the conversation right now, it seems like it appears that we're having this conversation because there's potentially reason to want to make it easier to get rid of staff. My reasoning for wanting to have the conversation is because I think it puts a little more control into individual employees that are on fire, have fire in their belly, that want to climb the ladder to get bonuses and reach higher rather than being complacent. Not that we have any complacent staff. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that. But I think we have the potential to get people that just are on fire to climb that ladder and get those bonuses. And he knows best. You guys know what we can offer for bonuses. I mean, you guys, you know what the finances are. You know how to juggle that and how to negotiate that. I personally, as an employee, I'd like to have a carrot dangling that I could reach for instead of that. I've been on those steps, and it's not much. And if I had the opportunity, if I was just a go-getter and had the opportunity to come in and just meet those goals that were set, I would want that carrot. I'd be shooting for it. Just my thoughts.
Well, I think it's very similar to so the council currently employs 3 people. We employ the city manager, the judge, and Joel as the city attorney. And I think, just as with our 3 employees, when we come up for contract negotiations every 2 to 3 years, they have the opportunity to come back to us and say, well, I want $10,000 more, I want, $20,000 more, whatever that might be, and we enter into that negotiation period. I think very much the same thing. I know there's some council concern over being able to attract the best candidate. Well, this offers us the leverage to truly attract the best candidate. We could have I'll just say again, I'm trying to not use people who aren't in the room, so I apologize. Now I'm going to pick on the Parks and Recreation Director. I'm just going round robin. We could, if our current director left and the new one came in, let's say they're from Phoenix and they want to come out here and they were making $200,000 in Phoenix. We know we obviously can't afford to pay that, but we might be able to offer something else that we could not do right now, and they might overlook us because of the current salary requirements. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities there, and like Krista said, you know, the ability to not only renegotiate, but go after those bonuses and incentives and things like that. For me, it sounds like there's kind of a lot of mixture of options. We can kind of pick at will but have incentive, or have contract and incentive, or there's
classified
not
an
or
incentive.
classified an
Yeah.
incentive. There's not just one linear line that we can go down, and I think that that's also really important, that we all have to we should all really make sure that we understand and consider, because I guess a couple weeks ago when this conversation kind of first started, I was more or less under the impression that there were 2 or 3 distinct lines you could go down, but it's nice to know there's a wide array of options, and that our like-minded communities are doing a wide array of options.
And I would never want a situation where we are putting people in a predicament of saying, I don't like your haircut. I think employees should have some kind of due process. Hey, what did I do wrong? Where's my, show me some disciplinary action. I think, and from what I understand, I thought it was possible to do that with any, even at will, that we could give them. I wouldn't want to take that from an employee. I wouldn't. I don't know if anybody else would, but we need to show some cause, not just, hey, I don't like your haircut. I mean.
Well, and that's, Mr. Mayor, members of council, that's why what we're talking about in some regards can be a little theoretical at times, because you have an at-will employee, you have a classified employee. I rarely, when I get the question from an employer that they have an employee that's having issues and they need to talk about what to do, my first question is rarely, are they for cause or are they at will? Because the reality is we need cause for both. And it's just that on the one hand, we need it in an at-will setting as a practical matter. We need it in a classified setting as a legal matter, like it's required by the law. In the at-will setting, it's just that as a practical matter that we need cause. And when we counsel on those things, I mean, your managers I've worked with for several years, and when they have a sticky employment situation, I mean, they call. They don't just run and decide to do this by themselves and like, hey, we counsel on it and talk about, again, these pros, cons, and how to work through. And the goal is always, the starting point is always, can we fix this situation with this employee? I mean, nobody wants, I say nobody, I mean, nobody here that I've worked with wants to just, hey, we want this person gone. We're tired of them. That's the goal, is to have an organization that's running smoothly and efficiently. And I think it sounds like your goals are the same too, and you want to be able to incentivize people to do that. So I hope that what you're gaining, at least apart from this, is that these are not mutually exclusive things, that if we want to incentivize people, we have to go this route and do it this way. You can do it under all these different approaches and settings. You wouldn't have to change a thing about your current classified status and go down that path if you wanted to, or you can make those changes.
Robert?
Well, these aren't specific, this isn't a specific question, but from what I'm hearing here is, what's the point of even having this meeting? If this whole thing was solely designed to offer incentives to employees, I mean, this is ridiculous. This is a classic situation of a rotten apple spoiled the basket. We have problems in a department continually over the years, one after the other, meeting after meeting, nothing is being done about it. And this is a way to have accountability in these departments. We need to be able to sit back. If we're here to say, oh, this whole thing is about incentives for employees, we want to offer you a carrot, so you say, or so you do a better job in your department. That's not what this was about. You got to have some context. The backstory behind why we're even here is because we had issue after issue after issue with departments, and nothing is being done about it. Certain employees in certain departments are using their position to manipulate situations with business owners, with residents, with staff members, and frankly, as a member, elected official of the community, I'm sick of it, and I'd like to see it change. And if one thing we need to do to send a message is to let these people know that we're not going to put up with it, and if you're going to continue to act and behave the way you've been doing over the past few years, we're going to find someone else who's not going to act that way. So I guess we really need to get it out in the open right now. Is this about incentives? Or is this about changing the culture and how our departments are running the city and putting accountability in these departments?
I think it's both, and I think you change the culture through incentives.
Yep.
It has been an issue. You're right about what drew the initial conversation, but I think we get there by dangling a carrot and offering incentives.
So, but the thing is, we've changed. It's, the whole thing behind this is that it has changed, it has evolved. You're not going to say, okay, you do your part, you do your job a little better and you handle your employees a little better, we're gonna offer you more money. That's ridiculous.
No, I would agree. Yeah.
So, Brian, because I've only been here for 10 years. And part of that time was when the economy tanked. In years prior to that, was there ever bonuses given for certain goals or anything? So the city itself.
There was a merit program, and that was based on 0 to 5%. We went through a program, and depending on the supervisor and the department director, they would keep goals throughout the year, and if they met those, they would get a merit increase. And any system, I always say the pendulum swings over time. That system went for a while, and the employees started looking and noticing who certain departments or certain things, and they didn't like some were getting more than others, and so they.
And so I was here whenever we changed to the STEP program. Okay, so because we changed that at one time, we could, and I don't know how you could incentivize I mean, I think our department managers as a whole group does a great job, but what would be an incentive? You know, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna pick on Liz, but,
Shouldn't have come tonight.
but what would you create as an incentive?
Well, there's
I mean,
all type of systems with performance pay, and when I used to work in San Antonio, we had a whole slot that the budget would put into each department for the department director to pay for performance and kind of incentivize. It gets really touchy because everybody starts watching that, but it also creates that environment of, trying to.
But it goes back to being budgeted so much for
Right.
possible incentives just sitting there.
That's correct. You have to budget for it and plan for it and put that in the budget.
Of potential.
A performance pay. So each year, when we're on the STEP plan, when we develop the budget, we'll set aside what we think we can afford. We go over that with you, and we put it in the budget. And it is one of the downsides of the system we have now is that you could get the STEP, and people just expect it. And but on the other hand, one of the things the department directors like is they get a chance to really talk about goals, and they don't connect their goals in terms of what they want to do in performance to pay, which isn't sometimes a good thing for some staff.
Teachers do it.
You're
What's
Honor.
that?
Teachers have it.
Teachers do it, yeah.
The school district's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Your Honor.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we wouldn't like to do that. I've always wondered, and I've had times over the past, what it would take, and Matt and I have talked about this, if we wanted just to start doing it and keep council, because it is an administrative type effort, and when we've had vacancies, we're gonna have to change the city code because 6 or 7 of these department directors are in the city code as classified. So for example, we would have to come forward and change that to be able to allow for us to do a contract. And we've talked about that. There's times when we thought maybe it would be a good thing to do that, and so.
But so, to go off of what Robert said, we're kind of discussing this because we've had a problem with one. So is our problem really with the lack of discipline to the one, that it's kind of evolved to the whole thing? And do we need to change that piece of it? You know what I'm saying?
Can I add a caveat to that, though? Because I agree that with both Gail and Robert that this is kind of started due to a specific department, but I don't think it might be one department right now, but it hasn't been one department in the past.
That's true.
I think prior to, there have been department directors that have worked for the city before that caused monumental issues for the community in years past and had far more power than they ever should have been allowed to have, but due to their tenure and experience within their role, were just kind of the grandfather or grandmother of that department and that role, and got away with far more than they should have because they knew that they could get away with it and kind of go down that HR path. And so it is one department right now, but we've seen this time and time again. And I don't think that in terms of job security, the employer is not, in any situation, is not responsible for providing job security. That is solely on the employee in ensuring that they are doing their job, they are meeting the expectations and the goals and the requirements and providing themselves with that job security. So with that, Bryant or Matt, because I know department heads report to you, have there been cases of department heads that you have had significant challenges with in trying to go through the reprimand process and or the termination process that this type of situation could have solved quicker and resulted in a better result in the long run?
It's a good question and a tough one to answer because it's hypothetical, right? So we've, to my knowledge, we've fired one director, at least in my tenure here. And I don't know if they ever did before that. And we went through a due process. We felt we were in the correct position, and they still sued us after anyways. Right, so I don't know how to talk about these legal matters, Justin or Joel, in touch situations, but what I'm saying is I don't know if it mattered if they were classified or at will. I think the end result would have been the same.
So from what I'm gathering, the problem is not so much how, the system is the same, where you have a process to hire an at-will or a classified. But what should we be talking about, what our procedure is to make this happen sooner so that we don't have a problem? Because it's not council's business to know what all of the
Well, I think it's a
employees-
teamwork process, and I think an early warning system to help us work as we work through those. I think that is about accountability and being able to keep track of and monitor. I think an employment agreement, which, I'm still learning. We're still I'm learning to what John Cross is doing over in Queen Creek, and they have an employment agreement with each of his department directors, trying to understand the pros and cons to that. And then if you get into a situation where you do need to separate, what that looks like, because there might be a severance clause in there. I don't know if you've worked at Queen Creek yet on any of those.
They're a member of the risk pool.
Yeah. And has he ever exercised any of those severance clauses in those contracts with the department director?
They haven't had a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
So it really is, it's so case specific, and sometimes it's driven in part by, a particular department that's having issues, but I am not I love John down in Queen Creek. He's a great manager. I'm personally not a fan of contracts of employment in most situations. I think that I have litigated contractual employment disputes, and those are a lot harder to litigate, in my view, than your at-will setting or even your classified setting. Because again, the classified setting, you just go through the due process, you do it, it's fine, it's over with. The at-will, usually you still go through a similar process, although not formulaic. And maybe they go to the EEOC, maybe they file their lawsuit. But the contractual disputes, in my view, have been the harder ones, because you end up getting caught, instead of talking about the actual issues that caused the separation, you're talking about commas in contracts.
Because sometimes it goes back to what the mayor was saying he uses this general, how do you say it, the general manager oversee, and then maybe the best answer is just to get rid of one of your contract employees. You have that authority in working with, because they have 3 contractual and they could let the directors, let the contract, me, Joel, or the judge know, and then if it's not getting fixed.
That's what I've always said for all the municipalities that I've counseled in terms of and I've been in e-sessions galore all through the state, and these work study sessions and talking with council. And whenever I've heard, and by the way, I have no reason to believe this is the issue here, but I'm just talking globally and generally, is if the administration of a city or town is not going as it needs to, you don't need to get into the details of those things. You go to your employee and you say, you fix these things. And a lot of times you're not going to know, by the way, all the issues and things. And this is where it's hard for a council at times that you may hear something from community members or other things. And I've got several clients where this has happened. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff going on. You may not, they may be working through, like somebody has an ADA protected disability and you're working through accommodations and other things like that. And so it takes time. Sometimes those things are going on. So it's hard to know from this level, but that's where you work with your contract employee.
It makes sense.
Kelly?
Okay, I always bring up my experience at the City of Phoenix, because that's what I know. And I know in terms of the City of Phoenix, in terms of classified employees, and I'm not talking necessarily specifically, department heads or directors, but just people in general, staff in general. And I had a couple of circumstances where I needed to fire somebody, okay? So when we talk about red tape and talk about getting there, there's a lot of effort and time that goes into that from the direct supervisor on up. So, but the good thing about that, as Justin mentioned, typically you have a pretty solid case in terms of being sued, because you've taken all these steps to make sure that you've given that person the opportunity to fix it. They continue not to fix it, and you are constantly, and I mean constantly, writing things up. I mean, you'll have a 3-ring binder this full of stuff, but literally you have a solid case. So whereas with at will, I'm just fearful that we're opening up the city for more possible, suits or liabilities in letting somebody go. I guess would be my.
Councilmember Gremmel, you've brought up a beautiful point that actually shows the pros and cons of this, because on the one hand, you've identified that process, and we work with the City of Phoenix too. I don't know if you remember a few years ago when the Burton Bar Library flooded and had the big $10 million plus worth of damage. There were several employees that were terminated as a result of that based on information along the way. Went through processes over the course of a year and a half. How many lawsuits came out of that? Employment lawsuits, 0. Even though most of them ended up getting fired through that process. But it did help, and there was a lot of documentation. The flip side is sometimes people will say, well, and you probably had this experience, then you spend an inordinate amount of time where if you could put it toward the work of the job and not have to do so much of the personnel side, you could maybe be more efficient in some areas. So it's a tough balance, but from having your ducks in a row, the standpoint of that, it's definitely, it's a positive.
But you are still able to have documentation and things that lead up to that termination from a contracted at-will employee. I mean, you have all of those disciplinary, the same processes that we've been talking about, where at some point, absolutely you should, where at some point you can, or rather Bryant or Matt can finitely say, look, if we don't change the course of action, you're done, and we're cutting your contract. I think in terms of lawsuits and things, I mean, anybody who wants to sue is going to sue. Out of those employees in Phoenix who lost their job, and yes, you could bring in truckloads of cases. If they want to sue, they're still going to sue. Whether or not they win or not is up to them, and that's the challenge. I mean, we've seen this time and time again. I mean, our own school district has been no stranger to terminating superintendent's contracts and for their litany of reasons that we may never publicly know, but they've still been sued and they've still won and or lost and had to go through that whole process. And I'm sure many cities have done that with their city managers or city attorneys and judges or whoever else that they employ. So I understand that we have to be cognizant of the what if we get sued and what process we go down, but that's a whole different rabbit hole that I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're still trying to figure out, is this something that we want to do? Is it to incentivize employees? Yeah, sure, absolutely, there's an incentive. Is it, like Robert said, to really give our senior leadership the ability to hone in on our staff and be accountable to the constituents that we serve? Yes, it absolutely is. When we have problems with department heads, the 7 of us all get phone calls. They get our phone calls and so on and so forth. And we need to really make sure that those challenges are addressed immediately, because it is unfortunate that we've had situations, and we're dealing with it currently, that we all have to go back and say, well, something's being done. I don't know what it is, but it's in the hands of HR and something's being done, but I can't tell you what it is or how it's or how it's happening.
Anything else?
Go ahead. No.
Your Honor, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We're in the process at HR of fulfilling some of the questions you had with all of our comparables with regard to career status, at-will employment, probation, all the aspects, salaries, department director benefit packages in our comparables, so that we're working on some data that we can share with you after I have a chance to really review it, and Matt does as well, so that you can see kind of what our labor market that we compare to for compensation is doing in all of these areas for department directors, because I think we're still focusing around department directors. Okay.
Excuse me. I don't have any questions. Just to add on to what Kelly said, I have 25 years experience with Pinal County Attorney's Office. And Pinal County, as a supervisor there, I had to know policies and procedures. And if you follow the policies and procedures and you do your twice a year annual reviews or twice a year, and you document everything, you can take care of your problems like that. And I think you have a good specific, for any lawsuits or anything else, you have everything documented if you've done it right per policy and procedure of how you do, whether it's your clerk typist or a department director, it's all the same. Nobody gets any kind of favoritism or anything, whatever their position is. You don't have that issue of just because you don't like their red hair. So I'm all in favor of, what do you call it? The, not classified. I've just seen it work, and if you do it right, it works.
Krista?
Well, the good news is even if you don't do it right, you got the best dang employment lawyers in the state defending you, so.
There you go.
Just kidding.
If you do say so.
If we do say so ourselves.
Well, I think, I think Braden alluded to the fact that any employee can sue if they get let go. So that, this notion that, we can be concerned that somebody's gonna sue, we need to have our ducks in a row regardless whether you've said that. It's been said several times here. So to me, doing things the same isn't really a reason to keep doing things the same. Suing is not, it's a non-issue, anybody can do it. As far as council not being in the business, we are having this conversation because we keep getting phone calls year after year, week after week, same department. It is an issue. And yes, it has been taken to the boss. The issues continue, don't know why. And so we're having this conversation to try to find out what we can do to remedy it in the future as we are hiring in new directors. And if we don't have all the information for the work session to decide whether we want to take it any further, then it sounds like we probably had this conversation a little bit too soon and need to have it again when we have all the information to compare.
I would agree.
Your Honor, I think we would all agree that obviously what we as a council and staff want to do, what's best for the city and for the people of the city. So if that means we need to make this change, if we feel that that's the best thing for the city, then obviously that's what we want to do. If we feel that this is the best option for now, then we stick with it. But I think, like the Vice Mayor said, I think once we have a little bit more information from some of the other cities that are comparable to us, kind of how they're working, I think that would definitely be helpful to us.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, and I think it's clear from what I've shared with you, I'm not here to sound a voice of warning one way or the other strong. You better not do this or you shouldn't do that. We'll be here to help you through whichever process you decide you want to go through. There is merit to both sides of that thing, but we can help you get to where you want to go, and along the way identify little pitfalls that may be there as you take different approaches. But we're more than happy to help you guys get to where you want to be to best manage your organization.
So is the consensus that we're pending more information
More
from?
information.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I feel like, I mean, if that's the consensus of the council, then that's fine, I'll go with it, but I feel like this is just par for the course. It's same old thing, like we've discussed at department. Okay, we're gonna get this together, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, and then you do it, and then they come back, oh, by the way, you gotta do this now too. And then what's gonna happen? The next meeting, oh, guess what, there's a little more information we're gonna have to use. We better continue this again. It's kangaroo, man, it's ridiculous. But if you guys wanna, I don't even know what in the world is even being decided here. I mean, as far as, now we gotta look at other cities. Well, we're not other cities, we're Apache Junction. Other cities are doing it. It is working in other cities, and that's all there is to it. I mean, these are policies that could be changed and reversed. If we set the policy and it doesn't seem like it's going as well as we like it to go, it can be reversed. It's just every time it seems that there's something that could be time sensitive or something that we should, while the iron's hot to address it, there's always well, we better come back and discuss it later because we don't have all the information. And that just seems to be a growing pattern. And if, I'll just leave it at that. And if you guys want to continue it, we'll continue it. But I'll tell you, the longer it waits, it's just, we're going to end up exactly where we are right now before the meeting was even held. And more than likely, we will be changing nothing, and all this was a waste of all of our time.
What would you suggest if you had your druthers? What would you suggest? Are you suggesting we move forward with making the change and not wait for the information? What would you prefer, Robert? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Well, what I prefer is this virgin ground? I mean, is this something that is not done anywhere? I mean, is this something that is, we're inventing the wheel here? Is that what we're doing?
No.
This is something that's common in cities and towns all across the state and
I
country?
mean, and I didn't do a kind of a census of it, but if I was just spitballing, I would say there are a good number of municipalities whose directors are at will. Mm-hmm. There are a good number who are not. I mean, I don't know if it's 50-50, but it's certainly not really strong one way or the other. So, no, you're not blazing new territory here.
And I think that that's the challenging thing. I echo your sentiments, Robert. I mean, I don't like prolonging conversations for the sake of conversation. I think the challenge with this is, and I'll speak just purely for myself, is I walked into this thinking that there were three paths. You have your at-will employee that we have now in terms of department directors. You have a contracted employee like we do with the three that we employ, and I don't know, maybe a third option that I didn't consider, but it is open. In knowing that there are a lot of different avenues and hybrid opportunities, I agree that we should not just think about the incentives, we have to think about the disciplinary action side of it, and make sure that regardless, like Krista said, and I think Kelly and Tess both echoed, is we have to make sure that regardless of what path we go down, we have all of the paperwork and the documentation, because if we are sued, this is taxpayer money, and yes, I know it goes to the risk pool, but it's still taxpayer money that we're playing with and we're responsible for. I think the disciplinary action side, if that's the path that we're wanting to go down and figure out how to make it easier for our city manager or assistant city manager to discipline the staff due to the continual issues. We all agree there are continual issues that have been brought forward. Then that's the part that we need to go down. But I don't necessarily know if we're at a position to say we want to go with contracts and we want to move forward with that specifically, or we want to stay at will and that's what we're going with. I think there's opportunity to really come out with the best option.
Well, no one's saying that if we decide to go at will, that this is that we don't like your car, you're fired. I mean, everything, there is a, I guess you could say it's a unofficial due process. It's like, hey, you know, no one here wants to say, snap your fingers, the guy's fired. No one wants to do that. Everybody has a chance to rectify what they're doing wrong. But right now, the way it is, you said earlier about reasons for dismissal and things like that. Well, over the years, there's certain individuals that have been reason after reason after reason, but yet are still employed. And it's all about what I'm trying to do, or is what I would like to see happen, I should say, is that you have a department head that oversees their subordinates and people in their department. If someone in their department is going rogue, being unprofessional, in some cases in a threatening manner to residents or businesses, that director should discipline that person and document it, and as far as I'm concerned, a 3-strike rule kind of thing. But if that director feels like you got to go through act of Congress and court to fire me, I'm not going to do anything about it, well, then nothing's going to change. But if that director feels like that, if I'm not doing my job, that's grounds for termination. And you could, and all this thing about, oh, you're going to get sued because, you know, why? Well, you didn't do your job. This is your job. You didn't do it. I mean, I don't know what better grounds for termination there is. And if that director doesn't get his employees or his people in his department on the same page, then that director should be held accountable. And right now, they're not. And they need to be.
I agree.
So that's the only thing I would like to see happen. I would like to see a director who feels like, you know, I can make a paper mistake. Oh, and the biggest one around here is communication breakdown. I love that one. I mean, for crying out loud. But this director should be like, okay, if I come in late for work, or if I called in days too many sick, that's not great. You don't have to worry about losing your job. But if you don't do your job, you can be fired. And we don't have to go through a long process in court cases to do it. That would change the way the people in his department do their job, because that individual is not going to want, it's crap rolls downhill, right? They're not going to want, he's not putting his or her job on the line because this guy decides to go out and berate a resident. And that's what we're trying to stop. That's what I'm trying to stop. I want it to be a more professional surrounding. I want our departments to greet residents and businesses with professionalism, with being kind to them. I mean, no one's saying here that, you know, walk right over the city staff, but for crying out loud, let's work together, let's get things done. And if some things take a little bigger hurdle than others, then it happens. But there's no excuse for threats, and there's no excuse for, okay, we had a meeting with these particular employees, and during the meeting, right as rain, we're kissing each other on the cheek and buying each other lunch, but then after the meeting, nothing changed. So it's almost as if, oh, we'll get to the meeting with these people, and as far as they're concerned, in the meeting, oh, no, well, no, we got you, no, yeah, we'll work with you, oh, yeah, oh, this is, hey, we love you. And then after the meeting, it's ghosts. And then the person's off, hey, what's going on? I thought we worked something out. Why didn't we work anything out? And then it starts all over again. And so that's the kind of thing that I would like to see changed in the city. And that's just me personally.
So what you're saying is your job security is to do a good job.
Isn't that anybody's
That's your job security.
That's our job
That's always
security.
been my job security, is doing a good job.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's nothing wrong
Same
with
thing
that.
with being elected. You do a good job, you'll get elected.
There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. I think if
I
you
would
don't do your job, that's reason for dismissal. And I own a business, and I fire people, and
Yeah.
people call in, people are late, people make mistakes. I've had thousands of dollars in mistakes that were made by my employees, and I didn't,
Right.
Right,
and I
and
didn't fire them.
And I do think that there's a difference of a one-off mistake to continual conversations over continual employee issues or in our case, you know, constituency issues, business issues, development issues, whatever the case may be. I would agree. I mean, at some point, it is frustrating to sit in meeting after meeting and say, oh yeah, something's gonna get done, and nothing gets done. And then from a administrative standpoint where we stand now, I know there are things that Bryant and Matt are working on through the disciplinary process, and that is in your purview, and that squarely belongs in your purview, but it's really difficult from an elected standpoint to hear, well, it's slow, we are doing something, there's been conversations, and then have to go back and report that to the constituents and say, well, there's been conversation, but I can't tell you what's going to be done and when something's going to be done, because they do see that.
Yeah. And it's not been one specific topic. The problem in the department has been many different topics.
Well, or one specific department. It has not been one specific department either. I want to make sure that that is abundantly clear.
Yep.
That while we are experiencing this currently with one department, it has been other departments in the past.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to summarize all of this in my own brain. Either way, classified or contractual, have the same rights. Well, anybody can be fired, document.
Everything I've heard
correctly.
here, everything, and specific cases aside, because I know
Yeah.
nothing about, like,
Yeah.
contrary to popular belief perhaps, I know nothing about any departments
No,
or anything
nothing.
specifically here.
We wouldn't want you to.
Right, but I'm happy to talk about them later. But everything I've heard, we would be able to support a termination, whether it was classified, contractual, or
be the same.
at will.
And-
For those situations, somebody who's not doing their job, those sorts, I mean, I deal with those all the time, where the call is, we've got this person, and even supervisor, they've had this issue and this issue, they're not supervising this well, they're not doing this, and they're not doing this. We've talked to them, we've worked with them, we need to separate, and I'm not the one going, oh, hold on, you can't. No, I mean, every scenario I've heard here,
Either case, we can.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it sounds like it's more the disciplinary portion of it hasn't been attended to.
well, and there may
that's-
have been, and we just may not know, and that's why I say I would,
And we
Yeah,
wouldn't
and I don't
get
want to
into
get into
details
certain
either.
details of
You-
personnel matters
Well,
tonight,
no,
but there are
you-
some areas that we've,
yeah.
With
You don't
and I
want to
can't
lose your
legally, yeah,
legislative
yeah,
immunity.
yeah.
Right, and you can't. But to me, it sounds more, it's the disciplinary portion and making something happen sooner. Where in either case, documented, either one can happen just as soon as the other, basically.
That's been my experience.
Okay.
I think what we're seeing is that what we've been doing isn't working because of past history over the last years. And
Yeah.
there are a few council members that are looking to try something new.
Totally legitimate reasons to be discussing these issues. This, as I think it was Councilmember Schroeder, yeah, this is not, you're not the only council that's ever thought of this or done this. These are legitimate questions and policy decisions to discuss, and there are good reasons to go either way on this thing.
So is the discussion to move forward then, because I do think we're all generally a consensus that we're not here tonight, we need to move this conversation forward. So is the discussion to move forward more on the disciplinary side and how to address those concerns with our department heads versus the incentive opportunities, and how we address and how we go down that path will determine if we do straight contract or if there's something within our code and opportunity that we can provide our senior leadership?
I'm looking for both. I'm looking for both.
I think
A win-win.
I would be as well. I think it's a carrot and a stick, basically.
But is that, in terms of the, the incentive for department head or directors, I mean, isn't that something that Bryant or, as the city manager, Matt, we can just change that up? I mean, I don't know what the process is now. I'm assuming it's something to the effect of you meet yearly, you set goals for the director, right? And those goals are met, is that right, Bryant?
We actually meet way more than meet.
Okay.
We encourage our staff to be having performance discussions monthly and have discussions often, but we have an annual review that sets goals for the year, yes.
And that's true for the department heads as well?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess it's possible then to change that up a little bit in terms of, just saying, okay, the city council's looking for, stronger objectives or something like that, where we just kind of up the ante a little bit more without necessarily doing an incentive? Is that something that we're looking for as a council? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the incentive is, or, because currently too, let's ask Justin while he's here, now's the time to ask. So let's say we change it to at-will or we change it to contractual. So that happens to only the new employees that are hired, correct?
If you take a classified level employee and take that away from them, in order for that to be valid, you have to offer something in exchange for it, and we can talk about those things. Otherwise, which by the way, they can say no to that. So they control whether you're going to be able to change that or not for existing. But you're correct, council member, you can certainly change it for future so that any new person coming into the organization takes a different status. Contractual, general at-will, no contract, whatever you want it to be.
So if that's offered, and again, this argument of offering it, and the department director has the ability to say no. If they say no, but 2 years later they decide, hey, I kind of might want to go down this path, is that path still open to them?
Yeah, if you want it to be, it absolutely is. I mean, that's just the ball is in their court when they have that property interest. I think that happened at the state level, by the way, Councilmember Biggs, that when it was like a 2-year process, in fact, and more people started coming on board. What happened was, as I mentioned to you, the origin of these classified status was, hey, we want to eliminate political patronage in government employment. Okay, so let's make it cause. So there was a lot of clamor at the time in 2012, 2013 that, wow, if we move everybody to at-will, nobody's going to do it. Everybody's going to be afraid for their job because the next administration comes in. The evidence came out that doesn't really happen as much as it used to in the olden days. And so at first, a good number of employees took the carrot, that carrot to take that status. And over time, more and more did, because more and more people realized, I think as some of you have said, you know what? If I do a good job, I control my own destiny here. Nobody's going to fire me if I'm doing a good job. So they said, hey, heck yeah, I get an extra week of vacation if I take the at-will status and give up my classified status. I'll take that deal. So there are definitely things to work with. And can I, just as a parting, not that I'm leaving if you don't want me to, but I mean, we work with 76, 77 Arizona municipalities within the risk pool, plus others that are not in the risk pool. Obviously, every organization has issues and things and that they're working on, but I can tell you from an outsider's perspective, Apache Junction is very well run. I know the problem children out there, and this is not one of them in terms of how this organization is run. So yeah, I think you can be proud on the whole of the organization that you have. Apache Junction has a very good reputation in the risk pool community, in the Arizona community, in terms of well-run organizations. So just wanted you to know that that's the case, so that you don't think that I'm here somehow trying to throw anyone under the bus.
Over time, we've wondered how we can implement, Councilmember Grimmel, you asked the question administratively. So I think in a normal, I guess in a situation where this could come up, we would like to, as general managers in that form, to be able to bring to you alternatives and solutions on how we might be able to roll out a plan. Like, I want to go talk to the manager at Goodyear. I just need time to be able to go and do those things. And I know, Councilmember Schroeder, it's not fast enough.
Well, no,
you know what I mean?
No, that's not what I was getting at. It's just, I've been in this ballroom before.
Yeah, and I need to go talk to her, and I need to go find out, okay, see, you're doing this in our labor market, what changed there? And get a sense over in Queen Creek how that's working for them, and be able to keep reporting on it so that we could, and talk to our directors too, and see how they, would look at something like this. But
Okay.
I definitely think it is something that I'm interested in trying to understand, because it does look like the bigger cities, the fast-growing cities are moving towards
They're
a
moving
system like
towards it.
this, yeah.
Just one final comment. If I was a person that was more laid back, really not a lot of fire in my belly, I would look for the contractual thing, just meet the bare minimum. If I had fire in my belly, being at will or contract, it wouldn't really matter to me, because I'm a go-getter. I want to just, I'm going to climb that ladder. I'm going to please my boss. My boss says do it. I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be thinking, gosh, I don't want to work there. I want to come to AJ. Look at our staff. They're here because they love this community. They love this city. You just said it. We're not a problem child. We're doing something right. I don't think a change is going to limit our pool or chase people away. I think we got great people, and I think in the future we'll continue to have great people, and they'll want to be here. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue if we make a change. I don't.
I think we need to
Well,
get
you
more-
just recruited a brand-new police chief, right?
Oh, yeah, great
And
one.
I just have to tell you, for your second item, I'm gonna leave, but don't keep him here too late, because I know where he is at 5:30 in the morning. I recently discovered that he and I work out at the same gym, so he's a lot stronger than me.
Is that called a donut shop? Not because of you, but,
Right. No, I knew it was him, not me.
Get rid of the donut.
To get rid of the donut.
Well, and it is not speak or forever hold your peace. I'm always available if you have questions afterwards that you want to, these three know how to get a hold of me very, very quickly. I'm on their speed dial, I think, so happy to help out wherever I can.
Sound like we even
Thank
got
you,
a fourth person, you can get a hold of you too, at the gym.
That's right. You pull me aside, hey, can you spot me for a minute?
Okay, so we
Thank you.
go
Thank you,
ahead and
Justin.
continue this on. We get more information together and address it.
I think so.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a safe trip home now. Okay.
We're
You
checking
should
those
live
cameras
here.
at the gym.
We got homes here.
Yes.
Okay, presentation, discussion on ordinance number 1522. Who's going to address that one?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
members of the council, this item could take longer if you'd like it to,
No.
or a lot shorter.
Drag it out, Joel.
I have
I
all
can do
night.
that. I can do that, and Heather's here for that too, if you want. But actually, this could be very short, and what it is, before you tomorrow night, will be the ordinance that will essentially change what we currently do in the procurement code. And it puts it in writing in the code that job order contracting is allowed. That's what it will do. We already do that anyway with the cooperative contracts. However, there is a provision in the law that limits job order contracting. And job order contracting is essentially you pre-qualify contractors, and then you give them individual jobs. That's what you do, rather than a straight request for proposals or RFP. So it's a little bit different of a procurement process. It's a lot faster. There's pros and cons on it, but faster, there's less reasons for any kind of change orders. But what it really does is it saves time for the contractor or for the developer. And right now, state law, bless you, state law limits the amount to $1 million per, bless you, per contract, per job order. So the problem is that dollar amount, and what the industry is finding is that's not enough, because these contracts cost a lot more than that. A lot of cities and towns, and what the statute does, 34-605 and 604, it allows job contracting, but this particular code section says, if you want to change that maximum dollar amount, you have to do it. You can't just say, okay, we're going to do it. You have to do it in a public setting. And you can go as high as you want. There's no cap. We recommend a $3 million change from $1 million, and that's because a lot of other cities and towns are doing it. Some of these cities and towns can't even get individuals to bid on $1 million, on a $1 million road project, because it's not enough for these contractors. The industry has changed so much. The materials are so expensive. The labor is so expensive. I'm talking about the big ticket items. Now, the community facilities districts, so Brookfield and D.R. Horton. Brookfield has online 3 to 4 well sites that are well over $1 million. So even if they bid it out, they have to go higher. So if they want to do a job order, and they said it would save at least 45 days to do the job order contracting, where they have a pre-selected contractor already, and they want to give it to that company, that developer, construction company. Another issue, that they have roadway landscaping that's coming up, and that's going to be $1.8 million. That's what the engineer's estimate already has that. So it's not $1 million, it's $1.8 million. That's why we're suggesting we do this. There's also 5 major roadway segments that are going to be done they're planned from 2023 and on. So they want to start on that. So what this code section does, and by the way, there is one typo which I have fixed, and Jennifer does have the new asset-free copy. It's in the title. It should be 3-7-19. You don't have to put that in any motion because we already took care of it. That's the code section we're adding, so 3-7-19 to the current procurement code. And all that does, it says, instead of $1 million, we're going to $3 million. And I think in 4 to 5 years, that's going to have to be increased, assuming this economy continues to grow like it has. And like I said in my memo, a bunch of other entities have done this. 3 million is the highest one I've seen, but I think it's going to grow more and more. And remember, we're all competing for a limited amount of contractors. That's another issue. So that's what this item is. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay.
The one thing that bothered me about this was the statement where it says, Public Works staff recommends the increase to at least 3 million. Do you feel like we would need more now to be that competitive? Sorry, close your eyes.
So Joel, do you think we'd have to come back ever?
Well,
Hold on.
because look what we have in front of us with down south. And to have that competitive edge,
Well,
I don't want to be knocked out of the ballpark and waiting an extra 6 months because we couldn't do that 3.5. You know what I'm saying?
we have talked to, I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
We've talked to Brookfield, and they say 3 million is fine for the projects that they have planned. And so that's why we say 3 million now, and we could always come back and change the ordinance and go further. But right now, especially since you've never, ever done this before, you don't have a cap, or you don't have a dollar amount, because we don't do too many job order contracts, but we will be doing that with the special
But we've
districts.
raised this number before.
No, we have
We
never done that.
haven't raised the procurement
You're
or what
thinking-
the,
You're thinking of something else.
You're thinking
Yeah.
of the procurement code generally,
yeah,
and we did go from 25,000 to 50,000 for approval at council.
yeah.
This is different. This is a state mandated statute for job order contracting only. And they set the limit a number of years ago at $1 million. And so things have changed so much in those, I think those changes, I forget, it may have been 2012, 2014, I can't remember now. But the industry has changed so much that we need to go to 3 million. And like I said, Brookfield said, that's a good amount.
I will say, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Evans, we are interested in bringing that issue back too, though, as staff, as we continue to grow
So-
that
Well,
50,000. But that's a
instead of
different discussion than this
Doing
tonight.
it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to get knocked out because we didn't have that even
Yeah.
3.1.
Like,
Right, and this
You
is,
know,
this is
it's
the
a
first,
bigger buffer.
Joel, isn't this is our first attempt to get in job order contracting, period, right?
Well, to get it in the code,
In
but
the
we have
code, so we can
done,
do that.
we have done job order contracting, but usually through a cooperative.
Yeah, through someone
But,
else.
but remember, that was limited to the 1 million also,
So, like-
even if you do it through a cooperative.
Yeah.
so like Robert said earlier, you know, I mean, we're in the ballroom and we continue to do this dance and we're going to kick this down the road. I agree with Gail. I mean, quite frankly, the state of the federal administration right now and the state of the country as a whole, inflation is happening. I mean, it's 7% here in Phoenix alone in the last year. The economy, it's going up, but it's not going up in the right way, quite frankly. And we need to address this and address it now. And I don't want to necessarily say, let's throw more money at the problem, because essentially that's what we're doing. We are throwing more money at the problem because we are allowing this to happen. But I agree, in order for us to remain competitive and in order for you guys as staff to focus on other things versus saying, well, we're going to raise it to 3 million and 6 months from now we need 5 million, or a year from now we need 5 million, do it now. Let's take it to 5. I don't. It's unfortunate that we have to do that given the state of the economy, but I don't think we have a choice.
You may change it to 5. It was just a recommendation. And I went by because Brookfield and some of the other agencies had 3. If you want to go to 5 now, we could change the ordinance.
And I understand what Brookfield said, but Public Works, and they're the ones that are always looking for the money, said at least. And I shop thrift stores. I'm not just trying to willy-nilly throw money out there. But I've been in, but I've been in construction, and I know how, if you're not the one with the big money that can get that contractor out there, then you're sitting on your thumbs waiting for your dollar amount to come around. And I just don't want that to happen to us.
Is that the consensus of the
Mr.
council?
Mayor, Joel, is there any con of going to a higher amount? I mean, it's arbitrary. 5 million, 10 million, how far,
Well,
you know?
State law, you have legislators who look at this, and they see what cities and towns do. And many legislators, they don't like cities and towns. However, this statute does allow the increase. And they didn't put a cap on it. It's at $1 million now, but they didn't put a cap on any council changing it to a higher amount. And I don't think they will, because the state has the same issue with all of their construction. And so they go to their legislators also, and they get it changed. So I think the law probably, it may change in the future, but I'd be happy to change it to 5 million and bring it back tomorrow night with that figure.
What applies to state legislators doesn't apply to local governments. We know that.
I think 5 is a better number, but
If everybody's
I agree.
with 5.
I'm good with that.
Okay, then we'll change the ordinance, and so tomorrow night, we'll have to have an amendment to the current ordinance, 1522, and I'll provide that to the city clerk and all of you.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Joel.
Okay?
all right. Well,
Hey, what?
I'll go ahead and close the meeting now. Thank you.
Is that okay?